last name into it. Mark, how you been?
Well, this has been a pretty weird 24 hours, and I know now how Ozzy Osbourne must feel every day that he wakes up. If this isn't the crazy train, I don't know what is. Yesterday at this time, I was watching CNBC as I always do in the morning. I do Fox Business and then back it up with CNBC. And I saw the report and I said, what? So I immediately texted my two really good friends that work with LIV, and I'm not going to say in what division or anything. They had no clue of what was going on. So I said, holy boy, how did this ever be kept secret? In the 24 hours since then, there has been a multitude of, what ifs and what about this and what about that? Well, it just happened, and everyone's wanting answers right now to stuff that isn't even close to being worked out. And it's kind of futile. And I look at Twitter. Of course, that's my only outlet these days. I used to be on TV, and I used to have a couple of shows on radio, which I loved. But knowing how I feel about LIV and the PGA Tour, I could never work for a golf operation anymore, And I feel like I know too much about the tour. And I've just seen this movie before, guys. I've seen it before back in the 80s and the 90s, and I say, well, they're still up to the same old crap. And so we'll see how it all turns out. I'm just, every day is another enlightening day on, what they're even going to tell us. And you think that we feel bad as press or media or people that love the game? How do you think the players feel, Dave? Mark, how do you think they feel? I'm just asking you guys.
Well, I know a few people that are in and around golf, and I was texting with them yesterday, and by all accounts the players are hot, and they deserve to be and should be. The question that I have for you first, Mark, did you participate in the 4:00 meeting? Were you at any way? Because I know you're a PGA Tour member still. Were you on that call?
Yes. No, I wasn't on the call. Look, I've been in those meetings, many, many, many of them. They just basically talk in circles. I mean, they run. It's basically, here's the agenda. This is what we're talking about. No questions till the very end. And it's like a Joe Biden interview, He'll just read his deal off and then I'm not getting political. I'm just being real here. There are no questions at the end. It's basically they dictate. Now, behind closed doors and the closed membership meetings with the PAC and the board, that's where they really get into it. But a lot of the players don't even go. I mean, they just don't because they've been through it. They go to the first bunch of them because they're rookies. And after about 5 years, they say, why in the hell am I even going? This is just being dictated to me what's going to happen. This is what the tour does. They pass something, and then they basically take it to the membership and say why it's such a good deal. And then they somehow get it passed through the membership. But it's all a setup. I hate to be, so questionable about these guys, but it's just the way they are. And, Dave and Mark, I've seen so much crap thrown out there from what do we call it, the corrupt golf media, of which you guys are not. I mean, everyone knows who they are. They just lap it up from Jay, whatever this guy says. And now how do they look? I'm just saying.
Mark, can I challenge you on something or question you on something you said earlier? You said, I've seen this in the 80s and 90s before. Okay, what is it that when you were an active player and on the PGA Tour board, what did they do in the 80s and 90s that had you yesterday going, I'll be damned, they did it again?
Stonewalled. There were a couple of guys. One of them was a good friend of mine and a roommate for a while. His name is Danny Edwards. Won 4 or 5 times on the PGA Tour, became a race car driver, really good friend of Roger Penske and the Penske racing team. He basically saw some things that were going wrong. And he went to question them with attorneys and everything. They flat stonewalled him. Okay? There was the Ping lawsuit. The Ping lawsuit was Carsten Solheim did not like the way that the PGA Tour came down with illegal grooves, they called it, square grooves. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That whole thing in the 80s? Well, let me tell you something. Carsten Solheim became the Antichrist all of a sudden on the PGA Tour. This was a nice dude. Very good guy. They had this guy so vilified that I think it caused his death. I mean, this guy was kind of a feeble old guy, but he was one of these, scientist guys. And they just beat him to death.
And then obviously what they did to Norman in the 90s with his idea of the World Tour, which they badmouthed him and then took the idea and turned it into WGC events. Okay, I just wanted to clarify, with your experience when you said something like that to those that are joining this discussion and, what have you.
Right.
Mark, did this
surprise? This isn't just coming out of my butt. I mean,
right.
It's something that I lived, and I'm seeing it again, and it's just now we're talking about big dollars.
Mark,
and I can understand Phil and all these guys want to leave the tour.
Why do you think, from the tour standpoint, that they were motivated to do this? In your estimation, what motivated them to do a deal with Satan?
It's all about the books, guys. They always said our books are open. Nobody's seen the books. And they have this 501c3 designation. How they are a nonprofit organization, I will never know. Because the PGA Tour doesn't give money directly to charity. It's the companies like the Salesmanship Club at the Byron Nelson Classic. Okay? It's those guys that raise the money and give the money. The PGA Tour is not responsible. They facilitate these guys. Yet the PGA Tour, look, it's their game. They conjured it up. Dean Beeman, followed by Tim Fincham, followed by, Jay Monahan. I've been through 3 of these guys, and they all have the same MO. That's it. They're a feather in their nest, rightfully so to some point. But when it starts getting to be where the commissioner's making more money than 99% of the players out there, and there's plenty of money to go around, obviously, the guys like Phil, the guys like Greg, the guys that have had questions, I think even Rom's got questions, they're going to say, hey, guys, what's in it for me, or I'm going to bolt. And that's where I think Rory comes in. I think that's where JT comes in. I think that's where all these guys are, hey, guys, just don't worry. We'll take care of you. And so now, if you're Jay Monahan, holy mackerel, I just don't think it goes well for him now. At least it wouldn't if I was still a member of the PGA Tour, which I was for almost 20 years.
What recourse do the players like Rory have outside of quitting and bypassing some events? I mean, this is just shoved down their throats, and it's take it or leave it, and there's nowhere else to go, right, Mark?
No, there are places to go. I mean, there are places to play golf. It's a worldwide game. I don't know Rory's exact situation, except that he can't spend half the money that he's got from now until he dies. So I guess in that way, who gives a dang, But overall, I just think that these guys were spat on. I think, the guys that were loyal to the PGA Tour, and I saw something else on Twitter. It said that, maybe 6 guys. It said all of this money was given up. They said they offered Rom, $300 million, and they offered Tiger $800 million. That's smoke, guys. Those guys weren't offered that. In fact, there were only 2 guys on that list of 6 that they had. It said $21 billion gone. And there were only 2 of those guys that were made offers that were on the big 6, I call them. So the press is just grabbing at straws. They're going through hearsay. They're not getting the LIV has been, so silent it's deafening. They don't give up their hand at all. But the PGA Tour and the players that the tour talks into being the mouthpiece, I want to say that Tiger's kind of a mouthpiece. We know JT was, and we know Rory is. They're looking stupid right now. To me, maybe they're feeling okay about things. Maybe they were made certain guarantees. But for the most part, guys, nobody really knows what's on the LIV side because they are tight-lipped.
Mark, we got about
go ahead.
We got about 60 seconds till we take our break. All right. What's the procedure to get rid of Jay Monahan? Like, if the players are like, listen, we have to live with this deal, but we don't want to live with you any longer. How do you get rid of your commissioner?
Well, it used to be, I think it's pretty hard. I don't know what the regs are. I do know this, is that in the past, they have had these evergreen contracts. If they ever do fire you as the commissioner, you've got 5 years of salary. So that's a huge number right there. So it would have to be something pretty bad. And I think there would have to be, a huge number of players that would just say non-performance. I'm sure there's something written in his contract. I don't know what's in his contract. And so, I don't know what's in your contract either, Dave. But I think the players could get rid of him if they wanted to. It would take the PAC and it would take the board. And the PAC is getting a mouthful right now, Player Advisory Council. Those 10 or 12 guys are just getting a complete mouthful from players right now. And if I were in Canada, if I were the Canadian Open, I'd probably just say, hey, guys, let's not even do this tournament this week. We can't even talk about
more with Mark Lai coming up on the other side. Thanks, Mark.
And we've got about 10 minutes remaining with Mark Lai, 45 years, a player and a broadcaster on the PGA Tour, still a member of the PGA Tour. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Let It Fly. That's FLYE. Kind of working the spelling of his last name there. Where do you think it goes from here? You're a lot more people on the LIV side are staying in touch with you these days than the PGA Tour side. Where do they think it goes? Is this going to be their 14 event tour as it is this year? They were even talking about going to 18 events next year, and it'll run concurrently parallel to the PGA Tour. Where do you think this goes?
Well, as Jay said yesterday, I don't see that happening. But as far as competing events, I don't know how it doesn't happen, to be honest with you. I mean, so the LIV, if they were to play on weeks that there weren't tour events, there aren't very many weeks where there aren't tour events. So it's going to be, this is a mess. I mean, this is like, wow, this is quantum physics with a ball of string right here. I don't have a clue. Remember, this is only 24 hours old, and I'm sure that let's sign the bill and then read the bill and find out what's in it. I think that's what's going on right now, guys. It's like this is a political fight here. I honestly don't see how the players can trust Jay anymore. I honestly do not. If I were still a playing member on the PGA, and so this is another way that the tour kind of has it over the players. Players are only on a 1-year pass. If they get involved in all of this, stuff around the game rather than the game itself, they're gone the next year. That's why I think a guy like Harold Varner, who is a non-winner on the PGA Tour, guess what? He's only got 1 year out there. Why wouldn't he sign for $35 million and play for 4 years? At least he's guaranteed. But see, that's how the tour, that's how it is with the players. They would always just say, hey, if you have a gripe, just play better, and it'll all be fine. And that's what they always kept with us. Now some of these guys that were pretty good that were losing their card. Look, if Ricky Fowler, who actually was made a very solid offer by LIV and turned it down and asked for almost double that amount the next meeting, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. Now, he's a member of the board, for God's sake. But if LIV hadn't happened last year, guess who would be without a card? Ricky Fowler. I mean, he barely squeaked in this last year and the year before. He's been on the outside looking in. So a player like Ricky Fowler, who is meant for stardom, all of a sudden, wow, he could be gone. So I don't blame the Brenton Steeles or any of these guys for, signing up for the next 3 or 4 years with guaranteed money, because we know how the tenuous line we walk on trying to keep a job sometimes. And on the tour, it's no more evident, than it is on the PGA Tour. You're on a 1-year pass. Unless you've won, then it's a 2-year pass. And so that's why I think the players are saying, there's got to be a better way.
Mark, in my head, all I keep going back to is a movie from the 70s, Slapshot, the hockey movie, in which they send the goaltender up to the GM and says, who owns the chief? Who owns the tour? The Saudis own the tour now, right?
I don't know. I don't know what's the fine print. I just don't. I do know this for a fact, is that the sponsors are not anteing up for these so-called elevated events, and even the non-elevated events. The situation that happened with Honda. Not all of a sudden, maybe they don't have a full schedule. Maybe that's why they're saying, okay, well, we got LIV to fill in now. Maybe we should merge with them. I don't know. This is what I'm suspecting could be a problem. So if you're used to, throwing a tournament for $10 million and Jay comes out and says, hey, I'm going to make you an elevated event, the bad news is you got to come up with 15 more million. I would say, what? What are you talking about? And if you're Honda, you've been a great event for a lot of years at a great venue. Now they're saying we couldn't get a field last year. We had 2 players in the top 25 and 5 out of the top 50 in our event. We can't continue to sponsor a less than significant event. So I'm sure that with the absence of Brooks Koepka and Bryson and some of the stars that are on LIV, Cameron Smith, I mean, wow, that's a big hit. So I just think that there's a lot that hasn't been determined yet. I think it's like, let's agree to talk. And so there aren't any answers. That's why the meeting yesterday was so insignificant. There's so much that still has to be worked out.
He's Mark Lai. Follow him on Twitter at Let It Fly, FLYE. What's the biggest unanswered question for you?
What's in those books? What's the tour afraid of? That's my whole thing, is I would love to find out where the bodies are buried for once and for all. Because look, I'm still a member of the PGA Tour. I like the tour. I just like the LIV too. And I would sure like to know the truth about everything. And God knows what the truth is. There's only a very few people in those rooms that know what the actual truth is and what forced Monahan's hand. Because I've watched these guys before. They don't ever give in. Never does the tour give in. And so something significant had to happen in there. Whether it's a legal battle, whether it were threats on both sides, I don't know. But they had to somehow get together. And I've got to think that Greg and Phil are vindicated, and they should be. And they're going to be like the Curt Floods, I believe. We'll see how this all unfolds. But Curt Flood was looked upon negatively for a long time, and he was responsible for a lot of players getting a lot more money.
All right, in a little over a minute, do you think after we go through this brouhaha, I mean, next week's the U.S. Open. In a way, golf can kind of quickly move on. Do you think that there's long-term fallout from this? We've had people say to us, I've dropped the PGA Tour app off my phone. I'm done. Mark's mom walked in his house last night and said, I'll never watch golf again. I know you've lost friendships over just being open-minded to what the LIV was doing. Do you think in 60 seconds that there's a long-term fallout for this negatively?
There's not a long-term fallout. You know why? Because golf is a great game. And there may be a little fallout for 6 months or whatever, just like there was with baseball and football during the strikes and everything. But the game wins every time. And remember, it's not just an American game. It's a worldwide game. The rest of the world is praising this because they are getting their 2 cents worth in. The golf world it's not just an American game. It's a worldwide game. So Australia, the Pacific Rim, South Africa, Europe, especially, over the moon.
Well, this may save the DP World Tour, which quite frankly was deader than a doornail. I mean, it was below the Corn Ferry Tour, quite frankly, as to the quality of fields. And the DP World Tour has been terrible. This may save it. Mark, thanks for giving us the time. We're going to call on you again soon. Hopefully you'll keep answering.
Okay, you bet. Thanks, David, Mark. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Mark Live. Follow him on Twitter. Let it fly. FLYE. Mark Live. 45 years and still a member. Player, broadcaster for 45 years. Doesn't broadcast anymore. All right. Let it fly is how you follow him on Twitter.